Hey, what's up? My name's Cameron and this is Design Based, a new channel where I talk about everything design. Today's video is going to be a fun one. It's an Illustrator tutorial, so this is going to be my tips and tricks to improve your workflow that I've kind of picked up in my years designing, and especially just watching how other people do it while I'm at university. So this is probably designed more for the kind of beginner intermediate designer who knows their way around Illustrator but doesn't know what all the tools do and could use some leveling up in your workflow. If you're already a pretty skilled designer, you definitely might find some of this useful, but regardless, I will leave all the timestamps in the description just so you can kind of see what's there and skip through to what's most relevant. Without further ado, let's hop into Illustrator and get the first tip going. Alright, so we're going to just start things off with a quick bonus tip, and that's just because this is something that I actually had to figure out lately that was frustrating me. So something that is interesting and that's changed kind of recently in Illustrator is making new documents with a web. There are some changes to the presets, so I usually go to web, choose 1920 by 1080, and this is what I'd use for something like a thumbnail. However, one problem with how it is now implemented is you'll see that by default snap to pixel is on, so it'll always go to a pixel, and that's useful sometimes, definitely for web where you want things on a grid. But if you're just designing on your own, that's something I generally almost always keep off. And it is frustrating to have to remember to turn it off each time you open a document. So what is the solution to that? It's actually quite easy. When you're making a new document, instead of using the web preset, you can use something else like art and illustration. Then if you choose 1920 by 1080 there, it's pretty much the exact same, but you'll notice when you make a new document, that snap to pixel will be off by default, so that won't be a headache anymore. So if you've watched any of my videos before, you might guess what this first tip is going to be, and that is simply using the hide artboards function. So this can be accessed under view and hide artboards, or simply Command-Shift-H or Control-Shift-H, and what this does is toggle the artboards on or off. So if you toggle them off, what it's going to do is kind of turn your whole background into white as if it was one giant artboard. So what is that good for? It's really good if you have a whole lot of kind of logos that you're ideating with, and you don't really want to make a new artboard for each instance of it. You just want to keep messing around, trying some new stuff. So maybe you'll have some over here and you just want to save some versions, which is really how I work, and you might have already seen that. But it does get frustrating when you don't have the white background everywhere. You could try to make your own, but really the easiest way is simply to go to View and then hide artboards, and then you just have one massive artboard that you can work on, and it's going to contain all your designs perfectly. So this next tip is using show outlines, and that can be accessed using view and then outline. So that's Control Y or Command Y, and this just shows your design as all the outlines. So there's no fills or anything, it's just the path that's around it. So here it doesn't matter what color it is, if it's stroked or what, it just shows what the actual paths look like. And this is something I toggle quite a bit back and forth just within my workflow, pressing Control Y all sorts of times. Why is this useful? For all sorts of things. So I'll show you a couple examples here. Let's say you want to align this kind of donut shape, so you're making the yellow behind it, but you're placing it and you can't quite tell if it's perfect. From afar it looks good, but quickly if you press Control Y, you will see that these are not perfectly aligned, and it's just really easy to see where all the shapes end, especially if colors are similar or something. From that, you can just align them and you can easily tell when it's perfect. Another useful thing can be, let's say you send your shape to the back and oops, that white was supposed to be in front. Now you could kind of select everything and send it to the back, but that might not always be possible. So another way you can do it is simply go to the outlines, then you will be able to select that object even though it's in the back. Then you can send it to the front again using something like Control-Shift and the square bracket forward, and just by doing that, now you can select this outline that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to grab if it was in the background. Alright, so this next tip is about making guides, and specifically how you can make guides out of custom shapes and convert your objects into guides. So just a quick bonus tip, if you don't know it, you can press Command or Control R and that'll turn on rulers. From there you can drag out guides, and those will just be lines that you can use as reference. Holding Alt will also turn the guide you're about to place sideways, just in case that's useful. But sometimes you don't want these guides that stretch across everywhere. Maybe you just want the guides to be literally just around this square. So what you can do is actually just press Command 5 or Control 5, and that's going to turn your shape into a guide. You can also do that by going View, Guides, and then Make Guides, and then you'll see this shape is just turned into a guide. So now the square is guides, and we can use those for whatever we want. We can make our shape around them, and then we can hide them if we want to using Control semicolon. And it's just super useful there, but also we can use this for all sorts of different things that you might never think of. For example, you might make guides out of a shape that you would never be able to make guides out of otherwise, like a star, and that can be done as simply as pressing Control 5, and there you go. Now you can use that as guides and show and hide it as you'd like. So the next tip here is using actions, and there's a lot you can do with actions, but I'm just going to give you kind of the really basic overview and also just what I use it for. So a couple of the actions that I have that I use are the one to center things, I use one to flip things, and I also use one to rotate things. And together these are super handy when working with compositions and just making quick transformations without having to go into transform, reflect, choose your axis, and flip it. So that's one of the ways I use actions. But how do you make them? How do you view them? You can open actions by going to Window and then Actions, and then this will pop up with this window here. You'll see there's a ton of pre-made ones from Illustrator, and some of these are great. So if you wanted to use one, you could simply click the action and then press play, and it will start executing that action. But if you want to make one, you can go and you can just press the plus button. That's going to make a new action. So let's say that we want to make one to flip things vertically, and we're going to make that in the default actions. You can set up the keys however you want. I'm just going to make it so it's F7, Shift, and Control. Set the color if you want, but that doesn't really matter, and then record. So now anything that you press will be recorded as an action here. So I can right click and then I can press transform, I can press reflect. I can do that. I guess my actions are kind of named wrong, but I'll do that over the horizontal axis. I'll press OK. Then you'll see here in our action, there's the reflect. So if that's the only thing going in our action, we can stop it here. But if you wanted, you could do all sorts of stuff in your action, like move it and everything. But otherwise you can stop it. Say you didn't want that move in here, you could simply just press the trash bin when you delete the selection. And now we have our flip vertically, and it will reflect our thing across that axis. So when I press Control, Shift, and F7, it will use that action. And it's super simple. You don't need the actions panel open or anything. Just a quick way to add some things you constantly do in your workflow into one easy to use button press. So the next tip here is kind of a two-part tip about color, and specifically managing colors and changing colors once you already have a design. So for example, let's say that I wanted to test out a different color for this NVIDIA logo. I could just select all the objects that are this color and recolor them that way, but that is a hassle, and if there's any more than like 3, it might be a huge pain to click them all and select them right. So there's a few ways that you can manage this now. One would be selecting one object in the color you want. You could also just select any new object in that color, it doesn't really matter, but select something in the color that you want. Then you can go to select same, and for this instance we're using color, but there's a lot of different same selections you can use. So I'll go to fill color, then you'll see it instantly chooses everything that is filled that green, and from there I could just change it instantly. Now that's cool, but I can still kind of do one step better depending on what I'm working with. So another option you can use is global colors, and these are different than colors just because when you change them, it's going to change the color of all the objects. It's not going to change just one color. So let's say that I had this green selected. We're going to put the first tip into action here and just select same fill color. Then we're going to make a new swatch out of it. But here we're going to make sure we check the tick box that says global. And then you'll see in the box here, it has a little white triangle in the corner, and that just shows that it is a global color. But from here, something cool we can do is, no matter what, even if we have nothing selected, just by changing this global color, it's actually going to change everywhere that color is used as well. So you see here, if we make it into a red or an orange, now everything instantly changed to that color, and that's super helpful when you're managing colors, trying out some different things for your logo, or maybe recoloring an illustration. So that's something that's super useful and one of the greatest tips I ever learned in Illustrator. So then here is a tip about using artboards and just some different ways you can make them that you might not have considered before. So let's say we're taking this NVIDIA logo, but we want to export it out as assets. So we can drag it there. We want one that's just a word mark as well. And I guess we probably want one that's just the icon too. So how are we going to export these? Let's say we want them on Artboards. There's a couple things we can do now. We could get the artboard tool and just drag and make one the right size, but there's a couple ways that are better. So if you have the artboard tool selected, you can just click the artboard tool there, or Shift and O, but you can click on your object and then click one more time, and it's going to actually just make an artboard around it that's the perfect size. So you can click on the object and then click one more time and it'll put it on an artboard. But let's say you already have an artboard here and then you just want to size it to your object, you can do that as well. And by doing that, you can go to Shift O or the artboard tool, then on the drop down you can press fit to selected art, and that's going to do the exact same thing we just got by double clicking. But that's just an easy way to make your artboards fit to the art that you're using. So this next tip here is a feature that you're probably all using, but maybe you're not using to its full extent, and that is using export for screens. So let's say we wanted to export these 3 different versions of the NVIDIA logo to hand over to a client. What we can do here is go File, Export, and then Export for Screens. We can also press Alt-Control-E or Alt-Command-E to get there, but once you're here, you're going to get a lot of options, and this might look over the top and confusing, but it's really not. Just as a quick little bonus tip, you can actually rename your files from here, so if one was accidentally named Artboards still or something, you can actually change the name here. But what we're going to do is set up some different ways to export it. So let's say we want them all as a PNG, we can simply go to PNG 1 times, click the settings, and we do want a transparent background, so that's good, but maybe we want more than that too. Let's say we wanted some bigger PNGs because it's going to be used on some Ultra HD, so we can make a 2 times version of that also. Maybe that's not even all. Let's say we also want a PDF exported out and an SVG. Now obviously if you were saving this just manually each time, that would be a ton of work. But here all we have to do is press Export Artboard. We've selected the 3 that we want. We're going to replace them because I've already done this once, but we're just going to export these artboards out. And now you'll see in this folder here is all the things we just exported nicely put together. So we have the PDF, we have the PNGs, we have everything we could ever want. And this tip really helped me out. I was super happy to find this out just because beforehand I would use export save for web and I'd save tons of different PNGs. It would take so long, but this is just such an easy way of doing it and definitely a must-use feature. Alright, so there we have it. Those are some of my favorite Illustrator tips and tricks that'll just kind of speed up your workflow and maybe make some things you've already been doing just that much easier. If you look on the side right now, you will see some shortcuts. So those are some of my favorite ones, as well as ones I referenced in the video. And go ahead and screenshot those, make sure you're familiar with them because they will also help a ton. Let me know which tip you liked the most out of this video and maybe one of your favorites that I didn't include. If you haven't liked the video, go ahead and do that now. It would help me a ton, as well as please subscribe if you're not already. And other than that, you should probably open Illustrator right now, maybe try out some of these tips and tricks, and just go design something awesome.